The abyss below. The ocean stretched out endlessly, a cold, blue mirror reflecting the storm-heavy sky. Emily Carter pressed her gloved hand against the submarine's thick glass, watching as silver schools of fish scattered like shattering glass. She had always found peace in the ocean's depths, until now. The research vessel, Nereus, vibrated with the low hum of its engines as it descended into the Mariana Trench. Inside, it felt cramped, the metal walls pressing in like a shrinking cage. The pilot, Dr. Alan Reeves, maneuvered the sub with expert hands, his eyes locked on the monitors that displayed their depth and sonar readings. Almost at 7,000 meters, Alan announced, flicking a switch that made the overhead lights flicker. Emily adjusted her headset. The deeper we go, the more it feels like we're leaving Earth behind. Alan chuckled dryly. Down here, it's another world, one we barely understand. A sharp crack echoed through the cabin. Emily's heart leapt. What was that? Alan's fingers danced over the control panel. Pressure's rising faster than expected. Hull integrity is stable, for now. But the creaking of metal told a different story. They were deeper than most subs dared to go. Emily's research was supposed to uncover microbial life in the trench, but something gnawed at her, an unease that twisted in her gut. An hour passed in tense silence before the first anomaly appeared. Look at this, Alan muttered, zooming in on the sonar. A vast shadow, miles wide, loomed below them. It wasn't a rock formation. It pulsed, like it was breathing. Is that a cave system? Emily asked, though she knew the answer. Before Alan could respond, the sub lurched violently, alarms shrieking. A metallic groan filled the cabin as the vessel was dragged downward by an unseen force. Emily screamed, gripping the harness as the submarine spiraled into the dark, the lights flickering out one by one. Then, silence. Darkness so complete it felt solid. Emily's breath came in shallow gasps. She reached for Alan, but her hand met only empty space. Alan. Her voice echoed in the dead radio. A cold realization spread through her. She was alone. Outside the thick glass, something massive shifted in the dark, closer now. Watching. The abyss had claimed her. The cold was the first thing Emily felt, a bone-deep chill that clawed through the layers of her suit. Darkness pressed against the submarine like an enormous weight, the thin beams of emergency lights barely piercing it. Her fingers trembled as she fumbled with the control panel, trying to restart the systems. Nothing responded. She inhaled sharply, fogging the glass. Come on, come on. A soft scrape echoed from outside the hull. Her breath caught. Another scrape, longer this time, like claws dragging against metal. Emily forced herself to move, yanking open the manual override panel. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she rewired the circuits. A flicker, then the control panel sputtered back to life. Partial power restored, she whispered in relief. The sonar blinked weakly, mapping the abyss around her. But what she saw made her blood run cold. Shapes. Huge, slow-moving shadows gliding around the sub. Alan, she tried the radio again. Only static answered. She checked the external cameras. One was shattered, but another caught a glimpse of movement. An enormous, serpentine form disappearing into the black. Suddenly, the hull groaned under pressure. Cracks webbed across the viewport. Emily launched the emergency ballast release. The sub shuddered, rising slightly, but the unseen force yanked it back down. Panic surged. No, no, no. The darkness outside shifted again. This time, something luminous emerged. A massive eye, lidless and cold, stared directly at her. Emily's scream was swallowed by the abyss. Emily awoke in darkness so thick it felt like a physical weight. Her head pounded, her helmet's visor fogged with shallow, panicked breaths. Somewhere far above, the weak emergency lights flickered, casting faint, ghostly glows through the murky water. She wasn't in the submarine anymore. The realization hit hard. Her gloved hands pressed against cold stone beneath her, slick with algae. The last thing she remembered was the massive eye, then nothing. Her suit's HUD blinked weakly, the oxygen level dangerously low. 30% remaining, the mechanical voice croaked. Emily pushed herself upright, the pressure of the deep ocean crushing against her body. but somehow she was alive. A cavernous space stretched around her, the walls shimmering with bioluminescent patterns, their glow both beautiful and unsettling. Shapes moved in the water, slow, deliberate. Watching. A distant rumble echoed through the cavern. Emily staggered forward, drawn toward a faint light deeper within. Her boots crunched over strange, brittle fragments scattered across the stone floor. Bones, some human, others unrecognizable. Her breath quickened. The cavern opened into a vast chamber where towering stone pillars rose from the seabed, carved with symbols that pulsed faintly. In the center stood a monolithic structure, ancient, alien. Something called to her from within. Despite every instinct screaming to run, Emily moved closer, each step heavier than the last. The abyss wasn't empty. It had been waiting. Emily's gloved fingers brushed against the monolith's surface, smooth, cold, and vibrating with a subtle pulse. Her mind reeled as fragmented images flooded her consciousness. Towering leviathans swimming through ancient oceans, civilizations swallowed by the sea, and the eye, always the eye, watching from the void. The cavern trembled. The ground beneath her feet split, releasing thick clouds of black silt that curled through the water like smoke. Shapes emerged from the darkness, skeletal forms with glistening scales, their hollow eyes fixed on her. Emily staggered backward, but the monolith pulsed again, its light flaring brighter, illuminating the vast chamber. The creatures halted, hovering at the edge of the glow, as though repelled by it. Her oxygen levels dropped to 10%. "I need to get out," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the crushing silence. A jagged path revealed itself, narrow and winding, leading away from the monolith. Emily didn't hesitate. She pushed forward, weaving through towering coral-like formations that twisted toward the surface like skeletal hands. The deeper she went, the more distorted reality became. Water shimmered strangely, gravity fluctuated, and voices echoed in her mind. Fragments of warnings, memories, and something ancient calling her deeper. At the end of the path, she found another submarine, half buried in sand, its hull torn apart by massive claws. Inside, the skeletal remains of its crew floated, their helmets cracked. But its beacon still blinked weakly. Emily climbed inside, her gloved hands trembling as she reconnected the beacon to her suit. A burst of static, then a voice. "Emily, is that you?" Alan's voice crackled through the calm. Tears pricked her eyes. "Alan, I'm alive. I don't know where I am. Hang tight. We're coming for you. Just stay where you are." But as Emily looked back at the monolith, its pulse intensified, and a low rumble echoed through the depths. Something was coming. The abyss was far from done with her. The cavern walls vibrated as the monolith's pulse quickened, sending shockwaves through the water. Emily gripped the torn metal of the derelict submarine, her heart hammering as a deep, resonant hum filled the chamber. From the abyssal shadows, the skeletal leviathans stirred, their hollow eyes now fixed on the monolith. Alan's voice crackled through her headset again. "Emily, we've locked onto your signal. But there's interference, massive seismic activity. You need to move." I can't," Emily gasped, watching as the monolith's glow intensified, casting elongated shadows across the seafloor. "It's like it's waking something up." The cavern walls trembled, chunks of rock falling like meteors into the dark. The leviathans circled, their movements slow but deliberate, creating powerful currents that tugged at Emily's fragile footing. Then, a fissure split open beneath the monolith, releasing a towering plume of ink-black silt. From within, a colossal form began to emerge, a serpentine creature with bioluminescent tendrils trailing like banners, its maw lined with rows of glistening teeth. "Emily, move!" Alan shouted. With adrenaline surging, Emily launched herself from the ruined sub, swimming toward the jagged path she had come from. The creature's roar reverberated through the water, a guttural, ancient sound that rattled her bones. Her oxygen warning blared, 5% remaining. The path twisted upward, but the creature was faster. It coiled through the cavern, its tendrils slicing through stone as if it were paper. Emily's limbs burned with effort as she reached a narrow crevice, barely wide enough for her to slip through. The massive eye found her again. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then the tendrils lashed out. Emily ducked into the crevice, the impact shaking the stone walls around her. Her HUD flickered violently, oxygen critical. Up ahead, a faint light, an escape. With the last of her strength, Emily propelled herself upward. The pressure eased as she ascended, but the abyss wasn't done. The creature surged after her, its roar a deafening crescendo. Just as her oxygen hit zero, a clawed tendril grazed her leg. And then a blinding light engulfed her. The Nereus hovered above, its floodlights cutting through the blackness. Robotic arms reached down, grabbing Emily and hauling her into the airlock. Her helmet was torn off, fresh oxygen flooding her lungs as Alan pulled her into the cabin. "You're safe," he panted. But Emily's wide eyes remained locked on the viewport, where the monolith's pulse dimmed, and the creature sank back into the depths. "For now," she whispered. Emily never escaped the abyss. Though her body was recovered, something was wrong. Her eyes, once bright with curiosity, now reflected the same cold, lidless gaze she had seen in the deep. Alan noticed it first, the way she would stare for hours at the ocean, unmoving, whispering in a language no one understood. Days after her return, the Nereus was found adrift, its crew gone. Only Emily remained, sitting silently in the control room, her eyes fixed on the sonar. It pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat. From the depths, something had followed her back. The abyss was still waiting.